Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Realcomm Live. As usual, we got a great show for you this week. As I have done in the past, I'm going to try to pick one or two words to describe this show. Critical. We're going to be talking about access control and all the webs that it spins and all the tentacles that it has. From the old days of using keys to open locks to some of the most sophisticated electronics the world's ever seen. And if you think about it, access control, getting people into a building, so many implications, health implications like we saw during COVID, security implications where we see in some cities where the crime is a little bit higher. We've got demographic statistical information that we're looking for to determine how many people are in that building. So it goes way beyond just getting people into the building safely and efficiently. It's really the entry point to a treasure trove of data and other processes that turn this into a very complicated process, as you're going to hear in the next 20 to 30 minutes. So we have got three really, really credible, smart, successful professionals to join us today to talk about this topic. And it's not just that they work for big brands and run big buildings. They've been at this for a long time. They're risk takers. They're pragmatic. They know how to do trial and error. They've seen real estate technology go through various cycles. They've got a lot of experience, which in these quickly changing times with technology changing and circumstances changing, it's always good to have level-headed experience at the helm, and that's what we got today. So let's bring on our three guests. We got Nick Stello, SVP IT of Infrastructure for Vornado, Joe Rich, SVP and CIO for Related, and Ilan Zachar, CTO from Carr Properties. Guys, so good to see you. How are you?
Hey, Jim. Good. How are you?
Hi, Jim.
Hopefully by now we've all recovered from Thanksgiving, right? A few extra miles on the treadmill and back at it, right? So we chose the three of you to speak on this topic for very specific reasons. As I mentioned in the opening, number one, because you've been at it a while, right? Access control. Okay, yeah, getting people in the building, simple topic. Not so much, right? As we're going to talk about. But I believe that having a great deal of experience, not just technically, but experience over time, practical business experience, really lends itself to this conversation, because putting a key in a lock, as we're going to talk about, quickly has evolved to something far greater, right? Keys and locks, electronic locks. Now those electronic locks, part of bigger ecosystems, big data, interoperability, locks talking to other pieces of equipment. When we talk about it in the smart building perspective, it's gotten pretty crazy, right? So what I'd like to do, maybe Nick, we'll start with you. Just give a little bit of your background, your title and how long you've been at the company, a little bit about Vornado, and then quickly, where are you in today's world of access control, and where does Vornado stand, and what is it seeing?
Sure. So hello, everyone. And Jim, thanks for having me on this panel. I think it's really important and interesting. So Nicholas Stello, Senior Vice President of Technology with Infrastructure Technology at Vornado. I was afraid you were going to ask how long I've been here. I've been here for 25 years, but it is. I started when I was 12, so I've been here for a while. And really, through that time, we've really seen the maturation of technology coupled with access control. And our team here in corporate works very closely hand in hand with our brethren, our New York operations team that help us implement the technology that we provide to our portfolio. And it's definitely been a growing need and focus, all the way from marketing to senior executives.
So being there 25 years, do you remember the day when you saw that first electronic key card?
I do. Yeah, I still have my original card when you needed a picture in order to show your picture to get into the building at our corporate office in New York. I'm in New Jersey, and I still have that card as a memento. And that was our technology back then, a long time ago.
Yep, absolutely. Joe?
Hi, Jim. I'm Joe Rich, EVP and CIO at Related Companies. We're a New York-based owner-operator and developer of commercial and multifamily residential real estate. And I've been in and around access control for 20 plus years. Like Nick, I don't want to say exactly how long, but it's been a while. So I understand it, but it has changed dramatically over the years. And Jim, I think part of my comments today will be when you say data, the first thing I think of is cybersecurity. We
Right.
need to secure, as landlords, our first and foremost role is really protecting our clients' data. And the turnstiles are like the first point of that. It's entry. It's used every day, and it's public.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, cyber is one component of it. Privacy is another one, and interoperability,
Right.
data accuracy, data integration. Yeah, I mean, and we're gonna get to that question, like in access control, what are the layers? But let's hold off and let Ilan give a brief intro, and then we'll get into some of the questions.
I'm Ilan Zachar. I'm CTO for Carr Properties. I've been with Carr for 6.5 years. I've been doing this for the last 23 years. But my exposure to access control is really since I joined Carr. We're an owner operator of office buildings in the DMV, Boston, and Austin, Texas area. And I got into the access control just because we saw access control a little bit more than just opening the door. We saw it as a carrot inside of our mobile application, as well as a big provider of data analytics, which I'll show later on what we can do with data and how much access control helps us with that.
So, I mean, predominantly your careers are IT based, and access control is more operational. Do you remember the first time as an IT professional that somebody knocked on your door and said, "Hey, I got some questions," or "Hey, can you help me out"? Has that been recently? Was that a long time ago? Joe, we'll start with you on this one.
I want to say it was the first time we started putting in the turnstiles, and they needed connectivity for HID readers plus visitor registrations. I think it was a barcode at the time. And how do we tie that together with the access control system, which basically operated as each independent systems, and now for the first time we were trying to put them together.
Right.
And that's really been my first how we started it, but it's
How long
changed
ago,
great.
ballpark? The first time
Uh,
you were asked to get
I
involved in this
think it was
conversation?
2002 for very good
2002.
reasons
Okay.
in New York.
Got it. Totally get it. Alon, how about you? I mean, when was the first time you really started, digging into this topic?
So so twofold. One, when we did our converged network, converted all of our buildings into a converged network environment, which is like 4 years ago, where security almost fell into the lap of IT, security of the building, the physical security. But then at the same time, I'm going to say 5 years ago, when we were looking at our big data and our mobile application that we were starting to build, we realized that we needed access control as the carrot to download our application, because no one would really use our application if we don't have something that almost
Yeah.
forces you to use it. So for us, our mobile application is an amenity of the building. So because of that, access control was an integral part of it, and that's when we became involved.
Okay. Nick, how about you?
Well, we were years ago, operating the properties with, it's incredible. I said that that was the technology back in the day, right? The last 10 years, it's grown exponentially, and it's grown exponentially in terms of, yes, cyber and data, but it's grown exponentially with partnerships between all of the different departments within Vornado in terms of marketing and operations, right? Operations and IT work very closely hand in hand to deliver what the folks here at Vornado want to provide our tenants. And again, I'd say the last 10 years, it's grown exponentially in terms of what we've done in the properties. But prior to that, it was, the IoT was just another part, was another system, was another network that, admittedly, we didn't pay that much attention to way back when. And now it's a large part of what we do every day.
So let's talk about, not to get too technical, but just as a framework, the infrastructure or the structure of what it takes to make access control work. Just like in the compute model, you've got communication, you got operating, you got application data. Maybe a little too technical for some of our audience, but in my viewpoint, when I look at access control, you absolutely have a communication layer, right? Meaning that you got to plug that device, whether it's a turnstile or a camera or something, into something, right? So it's either an RJ45. In the old days, it was an RS232, and now we're talking, wireless capabilities. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about all the wireless technologies involved in access control. So you got communication, operating, maybe application, multiple different layers, right? To get the data out of the system into a middleware system, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And then ultimately into your applications, your occupant experience apps, and then, into possibly other systems, right? So that's pretty complex. And then of course you got the data that flows, and then you got the presentation layer, the screens and what have you. So is that fair to say that to make access control work in today's modern world, you have to be fairly astute and understand a lot of different technologies? Is that a fair statement? Ilan, we'll start with you.
I would say yes, because there is you talked about the simple layer about it, right? But you may have a mixed layer in the middle too with multiple vendors. We have one of our projects, for example, that wasn't compatible, that wanted to have one credential to our customer, across the entire for their employees. So we had to change the hardware in the building. So now you've got readers and credentials that are from one brand, while this underlying system of the building being a completely different company. Integration between the two of them have to happen. And that's before we even talk about the integration to the customers themselves. This is just operating the building itself. And at that point, you lose all your development, all of your construction, all of your operations people. That's when they knock on the door and they said, without you, we can't do this. And that's where, it becomes much more complicated.
And then you start talking about Apple wallets and Bluetooth, BLE, and near field communications, and U1 chips, and universal wideband, and changing technologies. It gets a little crazy. Joe, are you seeing? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think Jim, it also is driven by our customers, right? Like if it was up to, I think, us, we'd still be using the card with the picture on it, right? But we'd also have empty buildings.
Right.
Our customers are demanding us to move forward with the technology. And they want things like being able to open the turnstiles seamlessly with either biometric or with their phone. They want to know that their information is secure and private. And they audit us on these things now. So it is very different environment.
Yep.
And Nick, how about you? Pretty crazy technology.
Yeah, it is. And going back to what Joe said, took the words right out of my mouth. It depending on, it really comes down to what's the need, right? And I wrote 3 things, Jim, when you had brought up that question. It's data, it's control, and security, right? There's a lot of heavy, interaction and integration between various different parts of the systems, both physical and the application layer. And, we keep talking about a frictionless entry, right? In order to do that, in order for folks to walk up with their phone, and either with their phone or facial recognition, there's a lot of back-end integration that really needs to occur, is why I think we have jobs right now in terms of putting that together. But it is not straightforward. And I definitely agree, there are tenants that are asking us to lean over the tips of our skis just a little bit and be a little bit more progressive in this technology. And again, frictionless entry is what we're after.
Well, and for the audience, let's just talk about that at a real basic level. You got let's call it a 300,000 square foot building. Okay. So you, as the landlord, got your systems and your applications to get people in and out of the common spaces. But then you got a tenant who takes 70% of the space. Okay. So they have a pretty, strong voice at the table, and they're a big corporation, and they've got their own systems that they use in your building as well as all the other buildings they lease out. So now you've got to figure out a way to integrate the landlord system to the tenant system, make it seamless, and then standardize to some extent. That's a big puzzle. And I think, Ilan, you were talking about that earlier, with one of your tenants and what that entailed.
Yeah, we have a customer that the technology in a brand new development that didn't work for them. So, and they told us down the line that that they wanted to integrate, and they were too big of a customer for us to say no. So we ended up having to change all the readers and the credentials to be in a completely different brand. But we already signed the contract with the security provider, so we still have the back end system that has to stay there. And then they had to write an integration between the two of them, and all that because the customer wanted that. And so we have to keep on doing that. We had another building where we had the system in place, and they came in and said, well, we have now something different, and we had to come up with a bolt on the existing solutions to enable the credentials from two different systems. So again, the customer drives it.
So let's say you started with one system and then you had a big tenant come in and say, that's not going to work. We need this. So you change the system for that one tenant who represents 75% of the space. Does the 25% or the other tenants now use that system of that large tenant, or are they still using your original?
It depends when they come in. Most cases, you sign the big tenant before that. So when the other customers come in, they don't necessarily define for you what their standard is, but they ask you what is in the building, and they adapt to whatever you have in the building.
And also realize, Jim, if I may, if there's a single tenant that has 75% of the available space, they may have their own entry, their own turnstile that might be different than the building that is serving everyone else. And, that's a possibility as well.
But then they get to the elevator, Nick, right? They get to the elevator, and the elevator is a destination dispatch. And now, even though they had their own turnstile, which is aside from yours, now they get to the destination dispatch and they present their credential, but that's my system now. That's not their system.
Right.
So you need to have that.
Correct.
Connection.
That's right.
And I think a really important point in all of this is these integrations that we're talking about are not trivial. These are not just taking one SQL database and moving data to another. These are between systems that really, some of them were never meant to integrate with anything. And so you're really,
and it's not a one-time thing. This has to be done all the time, real time.
And it's also the ongoing maintenance is also not trivial. You have to monitor the data transfers between both directions all the time, which is usually additional costs as well.
Exactly. All right, let's take a brief break, and when we come back, Ilan's going to show us some of his graphs, kind of giving you a visual understanding of the kind of data flows that are taking place and the kind of insight that you can get out of these systems. So we'll be right back. All right. Since we're trying to attack a pretty complex problem in 20 minutes or less, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So Ilan, you were showing and presenting some information in our prep for this call, and it really kind of said a lot in a very short amount of time. So why don't you take us through this scenario?
So can you see my screen now?
Not yet. There we go. Yes, we can.
Okay. So a little bit about the story about what access control does for us. During COVID, it helped us with, getting our cleaners into space or not out of space, which saved us a lot of money. At the same time, we managed to control our HVAC system based on understanding who's in the building. But just to tell you the story about returning back into our building. So this is one building, and you're looking at access control starting from January all the way to the beginning of November. The dotted line is an active month. But if you look at it, it actually tells a story of, back where we were, like, the maximum we had was 1,290 people. Then COVID hit, it dropped. We had a little bit ups and downs. Then Delta Delta came and we had another drop, and then we started seeing a rise. Then Omicron came, and now we're seeing a rise coming back. So this is a story of what access control tells us. But then our CEO came in and said, well, let's benchmark one person for 300 square feet. And again, it's just a number, right? We can use other numbers too. So we did that, and we said, okay, at a maximum capacity, we can only have 1,430 people in the building. And we really said that when we had the most amount of people that we ever had was 1,290, because you're never really going to have 100% inside of your building. Then we approached our asset management, and I said, well, okay, can we adjust for vacancy? Can we actually understand when was our building really at 100%? And we can see here that when our building was at 95% occupancy, we had 1,290 people coming into the building. Today, we're at a 78% occupancy in this building, but we can see that there is 1,009 people. So really, when you think about it, we may be in a better position now as we were before COVID or during COVID itself. Then you say, okay, now we went and we asked our customers what would be the maximum amount of people that can be in the building in your space at any given time. And again, this number is a little bit skewed because we only started this later in 2022, but this is what our customers came back and said, that the maximum amount of people that can be inside of their space. So now let's adjust the baseline that we said 300 square feet with our vacancy. And really now we're saying this is where, this is our 1 to 300 with the existing occupancy within the building. So at 1,112 would be the maximum amount of people, and we're at 1,009. So if we clicked on the return, now the numbers get a little bit skewed because that says that we are really at 97% return into the building, and that's not true. But that is because we're looking at the data on a monthly basis, where really we should be looking at the data on a weekly basis. And when we look at the data on a weekly basis, we see that, that we are now at a 65% return rate back into the building. And again, that takes the entire week. We can argue that Monday and Friday are very low days and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the high days. But this really, the picture shows you what access control really does to us and really explains to us where we are within the cycle of coming back into the office.
So to me, extraordinary, first of all. I mean, who would have thought that when you really looked at occupancy, which is leased space versus unleased space, which is different than utilization, that when you look at that leased space correlation with actual utilization, you're actually doing better today than you did pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. See, that's insight that you don't get unless you start digging into the data that these simple little turnstiles are spewing.
And we can argue, you're spending less time in the office, but you get counted. You can be coming in for like 1 hour, 2 hours. You still get counted as if you're there for the entire day. But again, it still gives you an insight and understanding where did you think beforehand that access control is actually going to give you that level of detail to be able to understand your usage of your building.
All right. So there's at least 2 or 3 more topics that I wanted to get to that we're not going to have time. So maybe if I could just ask you guys, will you be willing to come back in a few months where we can continue to dig deeper? That's question number 1. So with that, let's wrap up if we could. Nick, what do you say you guys are all in big companies, sophisticated departments, you got some resources. What do you say to the average person, or what advice would you give to the average, maybe mid-sized building owner who may not have the resources to do what the 3 of you have been talking about today? How should they approach access control going forward? Let's make that be the final question.
Yeah, I think, just like us, you have to understand what the end game is, right? Understanding what the needs of the company are is really important. Again, as we stated, there's a lot of technology behind those turnstiles. And Ilan, the thing that you just showed is very impressive for, data, sourcing and things like that. Is that something that they need? Is that something they need to do? I would reach out to professionals and work with the companies that have done those things, right? But it's important to understand what the end game is. What is it that we need to do for our tenants that will satisfy the ownership of that property? Just like many others, we've started down the road and we sort of veered off a little bit. We came back, and it's been something that it was a learning process, I'm sure, for all of us. I think you really have to understand what the end game is first, and then start developing it from there.
Yeah, that doorway into the building is got a lot of endpoints, and you got to know which ones you want to focus on first.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Joe, how about you?
I would say, to echo Nick's comments, I would say don't be dogmatic about the solution that you have, because again, if you have your example of a 300,000 square foot office building and you're trying to figure this out and you've got to listen to your customers, number one. But I think the answer, Jim, is very different if you have one tenant that's taking 75% of your building,
Yep.
or you have 10, 30,000 square foot tenants that don't necessarily care necessarily about everything that you may or may not offer. And then, you're going to make your own best decisions based upon the kind of technology that you want to put in to attract your multi-tenanted building versus working with that other tenant that has 75% of your building.
Ilan, I'm going to have you tweak it just even a little tighter. So if those mid-sized companies, smaller portfolios, don't have the resources that you folks do, consultants, integrators, where do they get their advice from?
Consultants, access control providers too. I mean, you need to, I think that, when you look at this, and every piece of technology that you bring into the building, and this is a broader conversation, is almost like playing chess, right? You've got the immediate solution. Yes, you're opening my doors, but what's the third movement and the fifth movement that you're going to make is how can you use that data, and what does that do not only from opening the door for me.
Right.
And that's, it's between the technology that is going to extend for amount of time. It's the integration into your other customers. It's the data analytics that it will provide you with. All of those pieces that you want to have in there. And you need to either look at consultants or look also at your access control provider that may be able to help you with bridging that gap.
Right. Wow. We were supposed to take 20 minutes. We took 30. No surprise. This is a very important topic. And next time we'll talk about, the near field communications, the BLEs, the universal wideband, the proximity wireless technology you need to get, into the building. Ilan, we're going to talk a little bit about with you with the GPS integration with that. We're going to talk about application integration. And then last but not least, one of the topics I want to throw back on the table is privacy. You go over to China, they are opening doors with faces. They're paying for lunches with faces. Okay. They're much further ahead than we are in facial recognition. But some people say that's okay because that can lead to some places we don't want to go. So those are going to be some more conversations that we'll have regarding this topic. And I really just want to say thank you for, number one, the hard work you do and the level of thought you put into these important topics. But most importantly, your willingness to come on and share your experiences to make it a little bit easier, hopefully, for the ones following behind you. So I really appreciate that. And you've been thought leaders as long as I've known you, and the industry thanks you as well. So we will be back with you as far as that next date. And until then, have a great weekend, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye. All right. Yeah, you don't get a class panel like that. These are phenomenal professionals with a lot of experience, and just again want to say thank you. So with that, Howard, I apologize. We are a little late with the news, but I'm sure you're going to be able to get us through and tell us what the heck is going on in other areas of real estate technology this week. Thank you.
Oh, hey, thanks, Jim. Nick, Joe, Ilan, thanks for joining us today. It was a great conversation. So I'll make this fast. So on to the news. Here's a couple of highlights from our weekly briefing, which goes out every Thursday morning. So our leading article this week is from our tech partner, Don Blaney, Senior Director at 111 Advisors and Altus Group. And it's entitled How to Align Your Data Strategy with CRE Business Strategy. Hugely important topic. And in this article, Don not only stresses the importance of having a data strategy, but he also gets into what constitutes a data strategy. Why does it matter? He follows on with good detail on how to align your data and business strategies. In my humble opinion, it's fundamental to any data transformation journey. So great read. Thanks, Don. Next, digital twin technology got a shot in the arm this week. Willow, leading provider of digital twin solutions, Microsoft teamed up to integrate the Willow Twin platform on the Microsoft Cloud for sustainability. So this is going to boost sustainability reporting on facilities with insights into carbon intensity and emissions and energy usage, and they can roll this up to the portfolio level. You might recall that Willow recently partnered with Procore to streamline the construction process from design to operations handover. And I personally am really glad to see this level of integrations with Willow Twin now. really should help move the needle forward in terms of digital twin adoption. Also, just announced another significant strategic alignment. Qualcomm just joined forces with Siemens Smart Infrastructure Group to bring 5G to smart HVAC building automation. They're using Qualcomm Snapdragon X55 5G modem to create private network services for better security, low latency performance, etc. And this collaboration, I think, could usher in a new network architecture that could potentially include CBRS spectrum. So really keep an eye on this. Finally, massive photovoltaic solar array may provide cover in up to 1,400 megawatts of electricity for a 270,000 square foot planned office building that Rushmark Properties is developing in Virginia Tech's campus near the West Falls Church metro station. This is a solar canopy. It's going to both power the building as well as provide shading. It's one of a number of amenities expected to be seen in this Virginia Tech's Northern Virginia Center expansion. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on this project. So that's just a few highlights. Lots going on. Check these out more in the weekly briefing. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Have a great weekend. Back to you.
Well, great. The one I want to bring a little attention to is the Qualcomm Siemens merger. We've been, really spent a lot of time trying to dig into the 5G, 6G in building private network, CBRS conversation. And I've been waiting for Qualcomm to make a move just because we know they're interested in this topic. And I think this one is significant. And I think there's going to be more to come. And you're spot on as far as ushering in a new potential architecture for in-building, networks. I think the next 24 months are going to be critical. And I think we're going to have some answers, 2 years from now. So
does that mean that deploying a 5G network in a building is going to be as easy as, as deploying Wi-Fi?
Maybe. Should be. Why not? I mean, think about it. They're both wireless technologies. One's been around for a while, been able to figure out a lot of the problems. That's where it's going to get.
Yeah, just radios and antennas. Yeah.
Just radios and antennas. Yep, exactly. Just new ones with new issues and new potential, but a lot more things to unwind and rewind, if you will. So,
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. Great job. All right. So before we wrap the show and talk about next week, let's hear from our final sponsor, and I'll be right back.
Access, manage, and measure your entire facilities portfolio. FM Systems' all-in-one workplace management platform enable facilities, corporate real estate, security, IT, and HR professionals to maximize the use of their facilities, manage real estate costs in a smart way, and ensure employees and visitors have healthy, safe, and inspiring workplace experiences. Plan against an ever-shifting, unknown world of work with FM Systems.
All right. First of all, I'd like to say thank you again to our guests, three great professionals, smart and willing to share. Thank you to our sponsors, and thanks to our Realcomm team for this week's episode of Realcomm Live. Always do a great job behind the scenes. So with that, next week, just an immensely important topic. Workforces, work from home, mobility, work from anywhere. That doesn't extend just between you and your local town. It means around the world. Working with people around the world is not a new topic. I mean, people have been working with teams in India and other parts of the world for, a couple decades now. But with the pandemic and increased technology and the upgrading of skills in people in some of these emerging countries, i.e. someplace like India, the workforce, the way we organize workforces is changing radically. So next week, we're going to have a crazy important topic: distributed global workforces. What does that mean? How is it growing? What does that mean to an organization? How can I take advantage of strong IT skills, from people around the world at a moment's notice? So they're working while I'm sleeping. And our confirmed guest is Justin Siegel, co-founder of Relay Human Cloud, and possibly Ruben Davidson may be joining him, the president and co-founder of Relay Human Cloud. So with that, I wish you all a great weekend, and we will see you next Friday. Be well.